Welcome to our podcast, A Novel Talk, co-hosted by Carl Lee, and I'm Wendy Kendall, cozy mystery author. I have a sweet treat coming your way this summer, my new mystery romance, Cherry Shakes in the Park, a mystery adventure of dangers, divas, and frothy delights. While you wait, my romantic suspense, Snow Kiss Cookies to Die For, is available at all online retailers. Desiree is a first grade teacher and Leo's on the school maintenance staff, and they're falling in love. But Desiree's being stalked. There are several suspects, including Leo. Is he Desiree's the one or the stalker? And enjoy my mystery book that began it all, Cat Out of the Bag. That's Cat with a K for Catherine Watson. She's a purse designer and amateur sleuth who goes from designer bags to body bags when she's faced with a murder mystery. In the prequel, Pistachio Makes a Splash, Catherine and Mayor Brenda Durling investigate a chilling cold case. The exciting sequel is in the works. Just wait until you see what Catherine's facing this time. And thank you to all the readers who've let me know how much you enjoy my books. And here comes your co-host.
And one of those avid readers of your work. Hello, my name is Carl, and I write paranormal fantasy. My current project, Selfies, involves sending a food services warehouse worker to hell to uncover the power behind a demonic social media website and put it to rest to save the girl he loves. Wendy?
It's so awesome. But now, our guest introduction. Our guest today is Linda Rosen. Her books are set in the not too distant past and examine how women reinvent themselves despite obstacles thrown their way. A central theme is that blood is not all that makes a family. And these books always feature a piece of jewelry. Her debut novel, The Disharmony of Silence, released in March 2020, and her sophomore novel, Sisters of the Vine, 1 year later, from Black Rose Writing. Linda was a contributor to Women in the Literary Landscape, a WNBA centennial publication for the Women's National Book Association. And she's had stories published in online magazines and print anthologies. She's a member of the Women's Fiction Writers Association and the Women's National Book Association, where she is selections coordinator of the Great Group Reads Committee, which curates a list published annually of novels and memoirs perfect for book clubs. Welcome to A Novel Talk, Linda Rosen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and just listening to both of you, I've just added to my TBR pile, which is toppling over, but I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you too. Linda, in your book, Disharmony of Silence, family is very important to all of us, but in this book, it's very important key theme to the book. How does Catherine's lack of family affect her life and her decisions?
Okay, I'll just correct you. It was Carolyn, not Catherine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it is.
That's okay. Yes, Carolyn is desperate for family. Carolyn is a 63-year-old woman in my book, desperate for family. She knows that her mother is failing. She's going to die soon. And when her mom's gone, she's really not going to have anybody. Carolyn was married for about a minute shortly out of college. She doesn't have any children, no siblings. Her father's gone, no aunts and uncles that she knows of. But she wants a family so desperately that when she uncovers a secret held for 85 years, against everyone telling her not to do anything with this, she's determined to reveal this secret because it could bring her everything she wants, yet it could ruin other people's lives.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
It's sad when old friends become bitter enemies. In fact, the most bitter enemies you're ever going to find are people who used to be your friends. Can you tell us more about the Pearls and the Roth and the disillusionment of that very close friendship?
Yeah, well, the Pearls and the Roths in The Disharmony of Silence were very close friends in the old country. The book opens in 1915. So let's just set that scene, set that time. And the Pearls and Roths were friends for years before that. In, as I said, the old country, it was actually Minsk, Gubernia, which I just have a bit about in the book, which is part of Russia. Karl Roth left for the States earlier than the Pearls. And he came over and he had to live with his brother in the tenements in the Lower East Side of New York City. Very poor. And then the Pearls came over, and Harry Pearl did very well. He and his wife and his daughter, Lena, were able to leave the tenements and get to their own apartment in Brooklyn that actually had a tiled bathroom rather than outhouses. Karl eventually brought his wife over, Rebecca, and Rebecca was very jealous of her old friends. And she had a really hard time dealing with that jealousy and that bitterness. And she thought that her old friends were going to take Karl along and give him a job in one of Harry's butcher shops. She really believed Harry did him dirty. And she cut off that friendship. And that was it. They were not going to ever be friends again until years later when both of their children meet up and decide to get married. And the family had to come together. But did they actually come together? Rebecca is really just a very bitter, jealous woman, and it plays throughout the book.
Plays well throughout the book.
Thank you.
Another character, Kate, is an artist, and she is an 85-year-old force of nature. I don't remember if that's something you called her or something that I just came to feel about her, but she's definitely a force of nature. Where did you get the blueprint for this character? Because she is just so vivid and so vital in this book.
Yes. I love Kate. And out of all the characters, if I could be friends with somebody, it would have been Kate.
Me too.
I've been a fitness professional since the early 80s. And that kind of gives away my age there, but that's okay. Over the years, when I was a lot younger, I had women in their 70s, 80s, and 90s who were in my group exercise classes. I admired those women so much. And when I started writing, because The Disharmony of Silence was my first book, when I started writing, I wanted to honor those women. Mm-hmm. And I just am in awe of older women like Kate who continue with their work, their art. They are independent, they're physically fit. Of course, we have people who can't do that because of illness, but I wanted to honor the women that I've had in my life. And that's where Kate came from.
Yeah, I have a couple of Kates in my life personally, and I that's why I thought of her as a force of nature.
Yeah.
I just thought she was amazing.
I love that wording. That came from you. The wording is yours, but thank you. Okay. I like that.
So Carolyn, got the name right that time, is a bit of an amateur sleuth, and she finds a cameo, and it matches one that is in a painting that has been in her home for her whole life. Um, um, and the cameo came from her mother when she was going through her mother's possessions. Is there something special about that cameo? And what would compel Carolyn to follow the breadcrumbs to uncover the mystery of that connection between the painting and the cameo?
Well, yeah. When I came up with the idea of the painting, I had to have something special in it that Carolyn would look deeper into this painting that she didn't want to throw away, but yet had nowhere to put it, which leads her down the road of genealogy and, researching the artist. I personally have a real affinity to antique jewelry, and I have a cameo that the story my mother told me was that it was an uncle of hers who gave her his wife's, her aunt's cameo. And I've had that cameo for years, and it's just sitting in my jewelry box. And when I was thinking of what to put in that painting, I decided on the cameo, that it was going to be centered on the woman's bodice. But I had to make it very special because it had to be a unique cameo for Carolyn to wonder why that particular cameo was the exact same as the one in her mother's jewelry box. So I added a little silver flower into the woman's hair, because when Carolyn goes looking online at cameos with a friend of hers just to see if it's worth anything, they can't find a cameo the same. So Carolyn really now wants to find out, why does this artist have the exact same cameo as her mother's? I wanted to put my own cameo in there. And the funny thing is, after the book came out and I was with cousins talking about it, one cousin told me that the cameo that I had was probably actually her grandmother's. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but it's mine.
No, it was her grandmother's.
Well, let's not give that away.
No,
in real
your
life,
cousin.
it was my cousin who
Your
said
cousin.
it was her grandmother's, and I said no.
So people sometimes make decisions that shade a large period of their lives. Carolyn was lied to, and the effects of how she views lies, and that affected her greatly. What can you tell us about her views on lies, omissions, and just little fibs?
I love that question. Carolyn, yes, she was lied to from that ex-husband. She despises liars because of what happened to her marriage, because of his lies. And he had some very clever lies, which I don't want to reveal, but she despises them. So when she uncovers this secret, and she wants to reveal it, but she's petrified. She wants this relationship with Kate that's developing. And if she really tells her, what's it going to do? Will Kate embrace her as she wants? Other people are saying Kate will be very angry with you. You're going to destroy her memories. So Carolyn is kind of beating around the bush for a long time with this to get more information out of Kate, but she questions herself because she never actually comes out with anything that she could call a lie. And she wonders if her omissions are lies or is a secret a lie. And she wrestles with all of that, which ultimately leads more into how she handles the secret. But and readers have discussed that with me. Is a secret a lie, or is it simply a secret? Do you have to actually vocalize something that's not true for it to be a lie, or is an omission a lie? I guess we all have our own feelings on that.
Well, I have some Catholic friends who would like to discuss about the sin of omission. Um,
But with Carolyn, she had to, she hates liars, so she couldn't call herself one.
right.
That wasn't going to work.
It's really thought-provoking. Linda, at the beginning of your wonderful book, Sisters of the Vine, there's a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. "A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong it is until it's in hot water." I love that quote. And actually, I have a framed picture in my kitchen that has that quote on it. I think it beautifully sets the tone for this book. Can you tell us what drew you to that quote? And can you give a little overview of how it foreshadows this story?
Oh, absolutely. That quote came to me, actually, and disharmony of silence sort of fits in here too. When my mother was failing and in a nursing home, I was running back and forth. I was involved in everything. I do have a brother who, chimed in, but I was the one right in town. So my sister-in-law gave me a mug with that quote on it. And then when I was writing the book, I thought about it and I thought, that is perfect for Liz. She is thrown into hot water when the marriage is falling apart. That's not giving anything away. And she's got 35 acres of grapes. And she's got to get them harvested. And she doesn't know how she's going to go about this. What's she going to do? So she was thrown into hot water there. And eventually she finds her people. And I think it's a clever way of doing it. I'd rather people read the book to find out rather than me telling you right now. But all of the women together come together to help her. But there's also the character of Bobby, who sadly, her husband is missing in action in Vietnam. The book takes place in the late 60s and early 70s. So in a sense, Bobby's also thrown into hot water. Having to make a life for herself and her twin babies. So there was a lot of that going on in the book. Even with Liz, once she gets the vineyard harvested, she has to learn to make wine. She's got to sell wine. She's got to break into the all-male fraternity of winemakers. This was not easy. There were no other women winemakers in the Hudson River Valley at the time. Hardly even in the States. So she had a lot of hot water that she had to swim through.
Yes.
Oh, and the connection with the disharmony of silence was when I first started saying this about my mother being in the nursing home. When I got the mug, Carolyn and her mother in the disharmony of silence, a lot of that came from my story with my mother. So it fed into that too.
That sentiment just runs throughout your writing. It's just so poignant. It's beautiful. Speaking of Liz's Vineyard, it is a living, growing place as she starts it and cares for it. And then it produces its own creations of grapes. It's beautifully described in the book and reads so much as if it's as if after her two children, this vineyard is Liz's third child. And
it is.
it also represents so much in Liz's life journey. So can you speak a little about the vineyard itself, just the beauty of it, and also a little more about those other women who they also, I found, are nourished by this vineyard, surprisingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that opportunity. I will tell you, as I was writing it, I was so involved in the plot with the vineyard and developing the characters, of course, that I wasn't even aware until I was farther into the story about this vineyard is like a baby. And that's why she's calling her vines her babies. I wasn't even aware of what I was doing. Originally, I called the book Flourish because to me, the vineyard was flourishing. Liz was flourishing. She grew. She planted a seed. She was a seed, just as the grape seeds, the vines were. And she grew along with it. So did Bobby, because Bobby, as I said, came to her. Her husband was missing in action. Bobby had to make a new life for herself. The other women who came to help, you have Susan, now remember, it's the late 60s. Susan's husband didn't want her working. She originally worked in a florist shop. She was a manager, but her husband really didn't want her working. She came there and created a new identity for herself. She flourished along with the vines and then became Liz's. When they're about to open a store, she's going to be the one to take care of the store. Sandra is Liz's assistant in a sense. Sandra came to her, also just wanted to get out of the house a little bit, do something for a few hours and be back home when her kids got off the school bus. And Sandra grows, just as the vines grow. Sandra grows into this position in the winery. So all the women really flourished. They sort of came together as women of the 50s who thought, well, you're going to get married and have your husband take care of you, and which was very prevalent in the 50s, that kind of thinking, and how they grew into the women of the 60s in the second phase of feminism, just as the grapes grew and flourished.
And it's such a fascinating read to watch this journey that these women take. The way you show that, it's just a fascinating read. So
Thank you.
yes, absolutely. So often, other people can see things happening in our lives that are hurting us, but we are either blinded to it or we choose not to face it. And these special people help us. Can you talk a little about Bobby and her friendship with Liz? Because I think Bobby is a special person for Liz.
Oh, Bobby's absolutely a special person. In fact, I thought for a while that I was going to write another book with Bobby as the main character. I don't know, maybe it'll come someday, but that's not what I'm writing now. But Bobby came to Liz because she was at home with twin babies, worried about whether her husband was alive or not in the jungles of Vietnam. She did not know that he was missing in action at the beginning. Then she does find out. And she came to Liz really to get herself into something that could make her feel alive. And they developed this friendship because Bobby was the one who helped her in the vineyard all the time, though her husband was supposed to. He was supposed to come home from school and meet her up in the vineyard and help her out. He just wasn't there. And it was Bobby and Liz who really brought this vineyard to life and created the wine together. And they developed this beautiful friendship, even with their age difference. Liz is older than Bobby. But as you said, very often we're blind. Somebody's blind to what's going on in their lives. And it takes a really good friend who might open your eyes to it. Bobby was hesitant at first. And then Liz insisted. And when Bobby said the things she was saying about Liz's husband, and questioning his fidelity, Liz didn't want to hear it. She remained blind. But yet, when it all came about, Bobby was the one who was right there to help her pick up the pieces, to help her move on, and to really help her flourish, to help her become the woman she ultimately became. And Liz did the same for Bobby. And it all tied in with the grapes.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful relationship, and reading how the relationship, the way it starts, and then you read how it moves forward and what happens, but the interaction between the two of them. It's just a beautiful read. I enjoyed their relationship very much. Now, Liz's husband, Rick, he sees the future as sort of what he doesn't want to turn into and what he wants to be sure isn't going to happen. While Liz, she grows to see the future, I thought, as more what she does want to happen. Can you talk about this couple's contrasts?
Wow, that's a really good question. Yes, Rick never wanted to become his father. He was very negative. His father was a successful banker. He worked, that regular, wasn't even 9 to 5. He worked all the time. And when he wasn't home, he was on the golf course. And Rick was going to live off the land. He had these great ideas, these great dreams, but he didn't do a thing. He didn't even know how to go about doing it. He was only wrapped up in himself, his alcohol, his other woman. Where Liz is a real optimist. Every time she was knocked down and ready to give up, she'd say, "No, I'm not giving up." Behind all that was because she felt she had disappointed her father, who she adored, when she dropped out of college to marry Rick, and then the marriage goes sour. So what was the sense in dropping out of college to do this if it wasn't even going to be a success? So she feels that she disappointed her father, and she wanted to do something that would make him proud. And she wanted to be proud of herself also, and show Rick that I don't need you, I could do it. That was part of it also. So anytime she got down on herself when things looked like they weren't going to happen, she just pushed herself farther. And also Bobby helped push her farther. And there were those times when she really thought she was going to have to go back to selling grapes, and that's not what she wanted to do. She wanted to make the wine. And with Bobby's encouragement, she said, it was okay. We're going to do this. We're going to get through it. I can't remember if I put this in the book or not, but it was always in my head. I think I do have it somewhere in the book, that Liz was the kind of person who believed that if you want something badly enough, you throw it out to the universe and it's going to come back to you. And that's really her positivity, where her husband just didn't have an ounce of that.
Well, in Sisters of the Vine, we do get a featured piece of jewelry, and it is a gorgeous diamond ring. Can you let our listeners in on a little bit about this ring?
Well, as in Disharmony, I have the Cameo. I do not have a 3-carat diamond ring, so I can't show it to anybody. But I needed something in this book that was going to be, the touch point, whatever, the real thing that was going to clinch Rick and Liz, the way she was going to get him at the end. I don't want to give it away.
No, don't give it away. It's too good.
I'm not giving it away.
Just a little hint.
But Rick wanted that ring, and she really wondered about what was going to happen with it. And her decision, but it was really it had to be, they couldn't just have a divorce and she was paying him off. Yeah, she had to pay him for the land, pay him out. He wanted that ring, and that was going to be the real conflict between them.
And very symbolic too. Loved it.
Well, it was also an heirloom that came from her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law, who really was not a nice person at all, but she got it. And Liz, there was that ring. Let's just put it that way. There was the ring.
So, Linda, would you mind giving us a reading from one of your books?
I would love to. I'm going to give you a reading from Sisters of the Vine. It's in chapter 5, I believe, and it's when Liz and Rick, well, you'll hear it. They're up at Cornell when they've decided that they were going to plant a vineyard. They had this land for the longest time, and they didn't know what they were going to put on it, and Liz refused to grow pumpkins or apples like everybody else. And then when she heard about grapes, she thought that was classy. So here it is. Your soil and climate are ideal for our varietals, the Cornell botanist said. In the humid greenhouse, Liz stood next to Rick, a very sleepy Noah on her hip, and listened to the man speak about why they should seriously consider joining Cornell's experiment. And our Sauvignon Blanc grapes, they produce good sugar, he said. It has the perfect acid balance to make a fine wine. Liz shifted the drowsy boy to her other hip and drew in a deep breath, as if she already smelled the heady scent. She gazed out the large glass walls across from her. Fluffy white snow covered the hills of upstate New York, and Liz imagined their own hillside just before harvest, with rows of grapevines filled with plump, luscious fruit. If only she could call her dad right now and shout out the news. I'm going to grow grapes, French, American hybrid grapes. A smile spread across her cheeks. Maybe now he'll be proud of me. Rick, with his hand firm on Bethany, who was shuffling her feet and swaying side to side, turned toward his wife. Hold on, he said, his tall, lean frame intimidating. I know we want to do this, but we've got to be able to sell the fruit. And you said you didn't want to sell anything. She bit the inside of her cheek, then looked him directly in the eye. This is different, she said, enunciating each word. We're not taking these grapes to farmers' markets or setting up a stand on the corner selling them like lemonade. Clutching her toddler to her chest, she stepped toward the window, closer to her fantasy vineyard, then turned to Rick. I'm sure there are winemakers that'll buy them. We will be the only ones in the valley participating in the experiment. And who knows, maybe we'll make a little wine ourselves. Oh, he chuckled. It sounded like dry dirt where flowers would never grow. So you don't have time to can vegetables because you worked so hard at that nursery school. And now you're willing to make wine? He looked down at his daughter, who was twirling her foot, watching her red keds go round and round. Mommy doesn't have the faintest idea how to even begin making wine, he said. Isn't that funny? Liz narrowed her eyes. The high spirits she had a moment ago dissolved. The air in the greenhouse was much warmer than Rick's tone, no matter how hard he tried to lighten it with that little glint in his eye. And making fun of her with their daughter? Her stomach knotted. She and Rick had discussed the idea of growing grapes after they'd called Cornell's extension service, before making the long ride to Geneva. They were in agreement, or so she believed, no longer arguing about apples or pumpkins or what to plant on their acreage. So what's with the sarcasm?
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for the reading. That was very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Linda Rosen, for joining us for a novel talk. Can you tell us what's next for you and your readers?
Oh, yes, I am writing another book set in the late 60s, early 70s. Uh, this time, my main character, who's also in her 60s, oh, though Liz wasn't. She was younger in that book, but Disharmony, I have an older character. She's a sculptor, and her neighbor, who is the antagonist, like you, Wendy, is a best-selling cozy mystery writer. There's a great deal of envy and jealousy going on with a secret around an emerald. And it all centers around the period of time where women were fighting for the right to have abortions and women's equality.
Wow, this sounds very intriguing. There's
I
a
hope so.
lot to that. Well,
There was a lot to her other two books, too.
Oh, yes.
I'm glad you say that. Thank you. I always wanted to write books that people would want to talk about because that's what I love to read. So I wanted something that had some discussion points in them for book clubs. And I am available for book clubs, whether in person or virtual.
That's good to know. And listeners, you will want to check out the website linda-rosen.com for more information about the author and her books. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, a novel read leads to a novel talk.